Gamers have become less interested in strategic thinking and planning. In our blog post, we focused a lot on demographic cohort comparisons and how motivations are linked to in-game preferences using slices of contemporaneous survey data. But because we've been collecting data from our game motivation profile for about 9 years, we can also explore how gaming motivations have changed over a long period of time. In this blog post, we'll deep dive into a long-term trend we've uncovered over the past 9 years. Gamers have become less interested in strategic thinking and planning. The Gamer Motivation Profile is a 5-minute survey that shows gamers to get a personalized report of their gaming motivations and see how they compare with other gamers. Over 1.7 million gamers worldwide have taken this survey. The 12 motivations that are measured in our model were identified via statistical analysis of how gaming motivations cluster together. For this analysis, we used the data from 1.57 million gamers who participated in the Gamer Motivation Profile between June 2015 and April 2024. Respondents from China were excluded because gamers in China have a very different gaming motivation profile, likely due to the historically more isolated development of their gaming industry. What is strategy in our gaming motivation? What is strategy in our gaming motivation model? In our motivation model, strategy is defined as the appeal of long-term thinking, planning, and careful decision-making. Gamers who score high on strategy prefer longer time horizons for planning and complex decision-making with many underlying parameters to consider. All the branching decisions and likely outcomes seen in games like Europa Universalis and Total War games, who score low on strategy prefer more reactive, spontaneous gameplay and simple decision making with few underlying parameters to consider, such as in games like Just Dance and Animal Crossing. A good metaphor for strategy is the size of the whiteboard in your mind that each decision is taking to map out, think through, and optimize. Of the 12 motivations, strategy has changed the most. When we looked for long-term trends across the 12 motivations, we found that many motivations were stable or experienced minor deviations over the past 9 years. Strategy was the clear exception and had substantially declined over the past 9 years, and the magnitude of this change was more than twice the size of the next largest change. In the chart below, the dots represent the average strategy score among gamers who responded to the Gamer Motivation Profile each month between June 2015 and April 2024 using a rolling 3-month window. Strategy is represented on the y-axis as percentile, with the starting date, June 2015, anchored at 50th. The initial collected data is used to define the starting norm. Using the starting norm, the 50th as the basis for comparison, the average strategy score has declined to 33rd as of April 2024. Or put more plainly, 67% of gamers today care less about strategic thinking and planning when playing games than the average gamer back in June of 2015. How big exactly is a drop to 33rd? Both percentiles and psychometric are fairly abstract concepts, and the magnitude of a drop to 33rd can be difficult to grok. To help anchor this finding, here are some real-world magnitude equivalents using more familiar metrics. Is the equivalent of all men aged 20 or older in the US losing 17 pounds in weight? It's the equivalent of all adult men worldwide losing 1.34 inches in height. It's the equivalent of everyone worldwide losing 6.75 points of IQ. Gradual, persistent decline that predates COVID. When we initially had an inkling that strategy had declined, we suspected that it was potentially due to COVID and avoiding anxiety related to thinking about the future. But when we conducted the longitudinal analysis, several things stood out. The decline in strategy clearly predates COVID. It is noticeable from the earliest data collection periods, and the trend line suggests it started before June of 2015. The trend line also makes clear that we're observing is a gradual but very persistent long-term downward trend in strategy. Whatever the cause, it's likely not some single historical event, but part of a larger long-term cultural psychological shift. The downward trend slowed down prior to COVID right before January 2020, regained traction during the COVID era, and has slowed down since COVID restrictions have been lifted. So there is a potential argument to be made that COVID exacerbated or prolonged an ongoing trend. The decline is identical for both men and women. We'll look at potential compounds and data sampling issues in several ways. First, let's break down the chart by gender. Note that in the chart below, we've anchored the starting point of both cohorts to 50th percentile so we can more directly compare differences and change over time. Men actually care more about strategy than women, so there should be a gap between the lines, but this would make it harder to visually see any differences in the longitudinal trend lines. The decline in strategy is remarkably consistent across male and female gamers. This also means that the overall finding would be the same even if the proportion of men and women had changed over time, which is largely did not. See below. The decline is similar whether we're looking at US or non US gamers. The decline in strategy is also very similar whether we're looking at US alone or non US countries. As with the gender chart above, the starting point for both cohorts is anchored at 50th percentile to allow for better visual comparison of difference in the longitudinal trend. But why strategy declined over time? There are many seemingly related findings in terms of our media consumption habits. For example, over time, shorter YouTube videos have garnered a higher share of overall views. The duration of shots in movies between each cut has decreased from 16 seconds in 1930 to 4 seconds in 2010. The average time spent on a computer app window or a Word doc before switching to a browser window has decreased from 2.5 minutes in 2004 to 47 seconds in 2016.
Wow.
This light, the decline in strategy is likely not an idiosyncratic phenomenon among digital gamers, but parallels the general reduction in attention spans observed by researchers in different fields. But because of all over time comparisons are overly correlational, it's difficult to pin down cause and effect. While we often blame social media for our decreased attention spans, there's a lack of concrete causal evidence for this. Of course, it bears pointing out that causal evidence for this would be difficult to produce since it's technical to raise children in artificial labs. Also, the shot duration analysis in movies is counterpoint to blaming social media entirely. This downward trend in media attention span can be traced back as far back as the 30s, although it is certainly possible that social media accelerated the underlying trend. Another potential hypothesis is that the increasing negativity, polarization, intravenous, and emotional manipulation in social media has created a persistent cognitive overload on the finite cognitive resources we have. Put simply, we may be too worn out by social media to think deeply about things. For example, higher engagement in social media is correlated with lower math and reading scores and poorer mental health among teenagers. Of course, again, these findings are correlational and not direct causal evidence. Implications for making games and understanding gamers. Even if the underlying cause cannot be identified, it's clear that gamers have become less interested in strategic thinking over the past 9 years. It implies that gamers are now more easily cognitively overloaded when they play games and are more likely to avoid strategic complexity. This has implications for game design and marketing. Overall, gamers now prefer shorter time horizons to plan for, the number of steps and branching outcomes they have to think through, and less complex decisions that rely on fewer parameters to consider. And for those of us who study games typically in the more confined context of specific games, titles, franchise, this finding may help explain observed changes among strategy related player segments over the past decade that we would otherwise have more likely attributed to game changes or COVID. Um, so, what do you think? Why do you think gamers have become less interested in strategic thinking and planning? Are there other potential causes that come to mind? Do you feel your attention span and ability to think deeply has changed since the emergence of social media and or smartphones? Are there other documental changes in our media consumption habits or cognitive metrics that you think might be related to this? Have you seen similar or related findings specific to gamers and games research? There are comments. I just am going to have to go with the latest one since there's nothing to sort them. Powers goes, I wonder if individuals tracked over time would show this decline. Maybe this decline is due to different cohorts of gamers coming into the sample space. Maybe older gamers are just as interested as they used to be, but younger ones are now coming into the survey and lowering the overall ratings. Nick Yee goes, good question. In this post, we focus on some potential compounds with the sampling. Age, gender, casual core, hardcore have been fairly stable in our sampling over time. It doesn't rule out that something in our sampling has changed, but we looked into and ruled out some of the more obvious potential factors. Interestingly, strategy is one of the more age stable motivations. It's largely uncorrelated with gamer age, so even moderate changes in age sampling would have had largely no impact on strategy. Dentistry goes, could it be due to the fact for the past 9 years the total amount of gamers drastically increased, and specifically there's huge increase in the casual and hyper casual audience, thus reducing the percentage but not the total amount? Okay, so you were the one who brought up this article, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, things have definitely changed since we were kids because 25. Okay, let's break it down to something so people can relate to. About 10, 20 years ago, we were told as YouTubers to make content for gaming and stuff like that, no problem. We get people hooked into within 30 seconds. Now with TikTok and this what's that called, Instagram and stuff like that. I barely touch those two social media sites as to the best of my ability, but they cut down the attention span a lot by these younger people, whether they're gamers or not. And it's the point where the attention span can only watch the first 5 seconds. If they're not hooked by the first 5 seconds, then you lost that audience or lost that retention. And I can tell from my analytics as a YouTuber that it's horrible. Like I'll be having like 55-minute, 30-minute, 40-minute videos, whether I'm talking about games or I'm gaming, and no, they don't stay after like not even 30 seconds, not even 50 seconds. It's atrocious. It's like the ones I can't have a good decent attention span to stay for long. PewDiePie didn't have this problem at first as a gamer, doing online stuff back 10 years ago. But now with TikTok and all, I mean, he's lucky to get like, people staying around for long. It's, I know I should have more to explain for the matter, but then it'd be too complex because if I give you if I make myself an example, my attention span has definitely gone down for the last several years because 10, 12 years ago, I was focusing too much on studying and reading books from the library, written or reading newspapers like New York Times, the Financial Times, no problem, right? And all of a sudden, for the last like 7 years, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos like anyone else would on the internet. And that's where my source of information is at now on these videos and all. And even I myself was sticking with Amazon's Kindle service, the actual physical books. So things have definitely changed for us older people, whether we're in our 30s and for the baby boomers who are in their 60s and 70s, they actually, they're being dumbed down too. So it's we're being over consumed with information on a daily basis on a constant level, and there's nothing we can do about it for the time being until we retroactively bring newer students, newer like not just newer gamers or newer students, newer younger kids to old school teaching, and then they can use the computer, and then they can use the smartphone, then they can use WhatsApp or whatever, the TikToks and stuff like that. But after when TikTok shuts down in the United States within this year, next year, there's no telling how it's going to impact the everyday society within the next 10 years. Because people will have withdrawal symptoms from TikTok and all, and the pandemic started that trend where people were addicted to TikTok to a point that they were doing these weird schizo what they call when you burst out stuff and out of nowhere. I forgot what's it called exactly. South Park one of this matter, and you basically be like yeah, like you burst out with those type of those taunts or those antics. That it's like a disease that's called with tarkinesia, something like that. It's something of that sort. But that's for people who are already on mental drugs, like I'm myself, for example. But there's no telling the damage that's going to happen for the next 20 years from now, where the average user, who is like now 10 years old, in their 30s and 40s and 50s, there's no telling how well they can handle stress, how well they can adapt to their surroundings. Is everything's on the iPad or on the TikToks and stuff like that. So it's gonna be like a society where we got to adapt severely, and hopefully one day to make sure the society still is intact, or a civilization. I'm not trying to be all Mr. Doom and Gloom here, but I did forewarn about this with all the technology, the cameras that being everywhere. Literally, the United Kingdom had that problem back 20 years ago. Having it out in the open on their articles being read in these magazines and news sites and all. Even the Daily Mail, the Guardian, like they foretell the future, what the United States is going to go through 5, 10 years down the line, if not 20 years down the line. So it's a never-ending progress into control and power over people. The elites are well aware of this matter, which is why you don't see them on the computers all the time, or if they ever on the computer. Um, Mark Zuckerberg, even himself, his children, not personally himself, if I don't know about this matter entirely, but he doesn't let his kids or any of these tech savvy guys let their kids on these devices for long, if ever. So we are the ones that are going to be the consumers of the junkie consumer who doesn't have no attention span to register a thought properly or a sentence properly, or even as a form of desired in its fruition in verbal talk or verbal technicality. Like people are not going to be able to sustain that talk for a while. Like we're conversating right now, you and I, Triple J. That's going to be very rare in the future. And these attention spans, if the kids can contemplate proper social verbal communication, like voice chats, phone calls, but it's gonna be all text and stuff like that, or text to speech or speech to text. I'm not gonna. I can't do that. I just can't. You gotta talk, and that's
Yeah.
what I hate about these dating sites. Doing that to the kids now, and to me as well, to around our age. These adults, these young adults, between the ages of like 18 and 35, 40 years old, they don't want to. They always want to text. And I'm like, I don't want to text all the time, every time. I always try to tell these ladies, hey, if you want to maintain a relationship, you have to verbally talk. You have to communicate. You have to talk with actual detailed sentences. You can't just be on Xbox Live or on Verizon phone call, whatever, and then I talk to you about Ruby or I talk to you about something pop culture. You still can't understand that. We're not even talking about politics here. Forget about politics. Just in general speaking, people are losing that. It is scary. And that's what most people don't look at me as an anomaly because of the way I speak or the way I've been into contemplating myself over the years. I'm not some anomaly. I just read books or I read and understand my language or my verbal thought is coming to its fruition. So that's what's going on with this article I came across, thanks to Osmond Gold and all. You know,
Yeah.
so
Well, most with the dating sites, it's usually someone if they don't want to talk, it's usually because they're a guy masquerading as a girl, because they're gonna
that
try to
too.
hit you up for money.
Oh yeah,
I had that
how about
happen.
that?
I had someone try that last year, and it just too many red flags popped up at the last minute. I'm like, no. And then I found out the guy was, um, I found the where the girls' pictures were actually posted. Some guy just lifted them off a Tumblr that was no longer updated and copied them over to different profiles, and he was pretending to be this girl. Um,
Mm-hmm.
then I reported him, and the person got banned basically. So anyway, yeah. But that scams aside, yeah, the younger generation has shorter attention spans. No, that's not news. Um, what I really thought this was going to focus on was the health of brains because you got to keep your brain active, or otherwise that's a direct cause to Alzheimer's. Um, that's
I'm
why they
feeling it
say
too.
that's why they say like crossword puzzles and like basically the game section in newspapers is basically pretty good. Like the word scrambler because you gotta think to unscramble the word. You gotta think, or at least um, what you know about pop culture to fill in the crossword puzzle. Um, you have to think basically. Um,
Critical thought.
like I got like 7 copies of Brain Age, brand new. maybe I should pop in my DS and play that once every day for a few minutes, to keep my brain fresh. But basically, yeah, it's but this was more, instead of healthy brains, this was more about attention spans. Um, yeah, but
Yeah.
the gamers, I mean, yeah, that's why YouTube Shorts is such a thing, because they're trying to focus on the people who have short attention spans and won't stay around for longer than a minute. Um,
And I'm starting to consume more and more of YouTube Shorts and TikToks more, a little by little as time progresses. Surprisingly.
well, I haven't.
Okay.
I'm usually looking for long podcasts, or I listen to music on end. Um, like, because like if I'm on eBay and I'm listing a bunch of items, I need something to listen to for the next hour or two, not the next
Yeah.
minute or two.
And then no one definitely not going to touch the political and any form of library type of or your archives, like the presidential debates. I try to watch a presidential debate for an hour and 30, and it goes by so quickly than ever. It used to be long and drawn out, but now I'm very attentive to these presidential debates from like the 1970s, the 80s, 90s, and I'm like, are people watching this still? Am I the only one watching these videos? And
Probably.
it's in it's scary. That's what I try to tell my other gamers online in my network of gamers and all. I actually said, Lucy, I want to run for president of the United States one day, and at this rate, it's going to come down to who's going to take charge of this infrastructure, of its thought, of its the overall mind of society at large. Meaning that who's going to be the new generation or the new people that take over after the old generation, is no longer around. So
Yeah.
this is scary that it's coming to fruition. My actual predictions. Like one day, someone within our gaming culture or gaming groups, whatever, can be the next leaders. No, with no problem. And it's gonna be like an interesting moment on how the internet and the presidential, the local governments, the mayors, how it's going to be with the internet and all come to fruition with the Twitter and the Facebook and all. It's going to be an interesting set of events going to happen in this century, and hopefully it's for the best. It's I'm not trying to toot my own horn saying I'm going to be the next leader of this whole entire country. I'm not trying to be that. I'm not trying to be that arrogant, but but you know what I mean. Like it's like you never know. We could it would matter of decades from now, 40, 30, 20 years, anything's possible. It's people have to think hard and think long in order to survive in this world now. So
Yeah. So yeah, basically, attention spans have shortened. That's common. Um, but also there's really not like many strategy games coming out, I feel. Like, I mean, unless you care about like strategy based combat games, um Catherine I would consider a strategy game, because you got to
it's a
form the
puzzle
puzzle the right
platform.
way to get up the platform, to get up to the exit, basically.
It's like
uh
texture boobs.
yeah, so anyway, um I'm tired. I walked right into that one. So, but as I was saying, like Catherine, you got to think if how you gonna, which blocks you're gonna pull out, which ones you're gonna push out to get up to the um end of the puzzle, basically.
hmm
So it's so also, there's just not that many games unless you want to go back, because like those strategy games, also most of them I just can't figure out how to play. That's why Valkyria Chronicles 4, I'll bring that up again on Xbox One. That was that was interesting to find, a strategy game I could understand. Um,
Because on the ground, it's not like actually through a battlefield itself.
no, it is through battlefields.
It's a mixture of both, like Apex Legends, kind of.
No, Apex Legends is more run and gun, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you got to be strategize how to survive in that battle royale, and the mapping it helps out and all if you're a commander alone. But if you're on the ground, a squad leader and all, that you understand better what's going on in that down the battlefield by with that perspective.
Yeah.
So, in my perspective, that is, that's how I
Okay.
look at it.
Okay. Well, I mean, like Valkyria Chronicles 4, you can move a certain amount of people a certain distance. every round, and you got to fulfill an objective by the end of like 20 turns. So it's and then like if someone goes down and you got to rescue them, otherwise they're gonna die and not come back. So it's um it was, but it wasn't one and gun. It was more strategy than anything else. But yeah, so it's just basically gamers just have short attention spans, but we just don't have that many games that help people focus.
Not only that, we're dumbing ourselves down severely on our own self-deprecation. If you think about it, though, because there are some people out there who will willing to self-improve, like improve their handwriting, improve their typing skills. Like I've always had been for years, learn a new language, like French or Russian or even Spanish. For years I tried to learn Spanish, I still can't comprehend it properly, and little by little, I'm starting to memorize certain words and all. But even that's not enough. You gotta actually be like, gotta go back to like the 1800s, where there's this archive of information. I forgot which state had it. There was this test that would give it out to these students in one of these states, and it would tell them these students what is the right portion of point of view in relativity and all this complex stuff. It's like third or fourth grade type of material. So that back then is equivalent to what's going on in colleges now, and even that in college is starting to dumb itself down
Yep.
further. So we're not maintaining our own standards. We're just dumbing ourselves down to the point that we just don't want to improve our self standing in
Right.
thought.
Yeah,
So
we're dumbing down instead of yeah, we're dumbing down basically.
yeah,
Um,
it's not pathetic, but it is what it is to a certain degree. It's but an actual metaphysician talked about this, that in the world of metaphysics, the words are residual, but at the same time, if you break down the words little by little, reducing them from thought, reducing them from constant talk, then it's just going to go silent. It's scary because everything's going to be on the internet or on the computers we're using right now, and then the younger generation are going to be like, "Hey, I can't think," or in their minds they're going to say, "I can't think," or "I don't know what to say," because they can't contemplate it in words. They never experienced the outside environment because they were always in the internet, the computer, the smartphone. So
okay,
you know,
so I mean, we got to move on. We still got more stories to cover.
it's
Um,
something to be interested about. Yeah, a concern as a person of a gamer. So
yeah, but I'm just saying, it's not just any simple fix. I mean, it's also generational. So I mean, yeah, basically it's just the way things are. Unfortunately, it's
yeah,
what's happening with newer generations. Um, but it's basically everything. It's not just there's no one thing uh pertaining to this. There's no one thing that's the root cause. It's a number of causes. So
yeah, you're right.
any change to one thing is not going to help. And honestly, that's yeah, basically you can just only focus on yourself.
You're right.
So like I said, I mean, maybe put down, get away from the YouTube shorts and TikToks, listen to more podcasts about things that interest you, or just go to YouTube's section that's curated to you and find actual full length videos and listen to them while you do whatever. Um,
Oh yeah,
Also test your brain once in a while. There's riddles you can pull up on YouTube. Um, where if you feel like challenging yourself, pull up a video. People make videos about with riddles in them that and they'll release the answer afterwards. So like test yourself there. There's different things you can do that YouTube Shorts and TikTok is not going to help with.
indeed.